I still remember the day my son Michael was supposed to celebrate one of the happiest moments of his life, his wedding day. The sun was shining, the flowers were perfectly arranged, and the music floated through the air like it belonged to a fairy tale. I had imagined myself there, proud and joyful, sharing in the excitement and love that surrounded him. But that day turned into a nightmare I could never have anticipated. As I walked into the reception hall, a sudden chill ran down my spine. The smiles I expected from my son and his fiancée, Sophia, were nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a tense silence, a barely concealed discomfort. Sophia's eyes narrowed as if I did not belong. And Michael, the boy had raised, avoided looking at me. I could feel the whispers behind my back, the polite masks of other guests barely hiding their surprise. Every step I took felt heavier, as if I was walking through invisible chains of rejection. Then it happened, the moment that pierced me to my core. Sophia, with a polite yet cutting tone, told me I should not be there. Michael, my own, nodded in agreement. My heart sank. Humiliated in front of family and friends, I had no choice but to leave quietly, trying to hold back the tears. Outside, I leaned against the cool wall, my mind racing. How could someone I trusted deceive my son? How could I protect him from heartbreak and manipulation? I realized then that I could not just stand by. I had to act not with anger, but with strategy and care. I vowed to uncover the truth, to protect Michael from anyone who might harm him, and to ensure that his life was not clouded by lies. If you want to follow this incredible story and see how I uncovered the shocking truth, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss a single moment of this journey. Trust me, you won't believe what comes next. After the crushing humiliation at Michael's wedding, I could not stop thinking about the cold, calculating smile on Sophia's face and the way my son had turned away from me as if he did not recognize the mother who had devoted her life to him. I knew instinctively there was more beneath the surface than I could see in that single, painful moment, and I resolved to uncover it before it was too late. I started quietly, reaching out to a trusted police detective I had known for years. Someone who understood that sometimes danger came not from strangers, but from the people closest to those we loved. Sitting in the dim office of the detective, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. He listened patiently as I recounted everything I had witnessed. The tension at the wedding, Michael's uncharacteristic coldness, and Sophia's Sarah's abrasive dismissal of me. He nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he tapped a pen against the file in front of him. Sometimes people are not who they claim to be, he said quietly, and sometimes the truth is buried under layers of lies and charm. His words made my pulse quicken, both with dread and the sense that I was on the verge of something monumental. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper, to trace the threads that connected the woman I knew as Sophia to the life she had carefully hidden. Piece by piece, the picture emerged, more horrifying than I could have imagined. Her real name was Sarah Martinez, and she had a long, complicated history that stretched across several states. She had been married multiple times, each marriage ending under circumstances that were suspicious at best. Wealthy men, successful and seemingly secure, had suddenly found themselves ensnared in her web of deception. Their fortunes depleted, their lives upended. There were whispers, hints, and public records that suggested untold manipulations, fraudulent schemes, and alliances formed only to serve her own interests. As I read through the reports, I felt a mixture of disbelief and vindication. It was as if I had been staring at a puzzle for months, unable to place the pieces, and suddenly the outline of a dark and dangerous figure emerged with terrifying clarity. The deaths of her former husbands, each officially ruled as accidents or natural causes, now seemed far too coincidental. I could not ignore the pattern, the way each narrative of misfortune had conveniently cleared the path for her next marriage, each time securing wealth and influence with calculated precision. I remember sitting alone that night, the investigator's files spread before me, feeling the weight of the knowledge pressing down on my shoulders. It was not just about protecting Michael. It was about understanding the reality of the danger he was unknowingly entangled in. My heart ached as I realized the woman he loved, the woman he had chosen to spend his life with, was a master manipulator whose charm masked a trail of devastation. I could see now why the wedding had gone the way it did, why Michael had hesitated to confront the truth, and why Sophia had so effortlessly dismissed me without fear. But in that moment, amidst the fear and the anger, I felt a resolve I had never known before. I could not allow him to walk further down a path lined with deceit and hidden threats. I began to plan carefully, methodically, knowing that every step I took had to be precise. If Michael were to be shielded from this danger, I had to act with patience, intelligence, and subtlety. I understood that confronting Sarah directly would only push her deeper into secrecy and manipulation, so I focused on collecting evidence, understanding her methods, and preparing a strategy that would protect my son without alerting her to my intentions. It was a revelation that shook me to the core, but it also ignited a fire within me. I would not be a passive observer in the life of my son. I would uncover the full truth, and I would do everything in my power to ensure that Michael saw reality before it was too late. The woman he thought he knew was only a shadow of her true self, and I, his mother, would be the light that revealed her darkness. Once I realized the full extent of Sarah's past, the urgency to act became a relentless pulse in my veins. I knew that mere suspicions or whispered warnings would never suffice. Michael needed proof, undeniable and irrefutable, that the woman he had so blindly trusted was not who she claimed to be. I returned to the private investigator, a quiet and meticulous man whose patience I had come to rely on, and together we devised a plan to gather the evidence that could reveal the truth in its full, unflinching clarity. We began by tracing every financial move, every document that hinted at manipulation or deception. Hours turned into days as we combed through public records, bank statements, and legal filings, each piece of information a small key unlocking the door to a larger, more disturbing reality. I watched with a mix of fascination and dread as the investigator pointed out patterns that were invisible to anyone else: loans taken under false pretenses, sudden asset transfers before a marriage, companies quietly dissolved, and legal loopholes exploited with cold precision. Sarah's life, which appeared outwardly glamorous and enviable, was built on a fragile and carefully constructed web of lies. And each thread we uncovered brought me closer to understanding the full scale of her deceit. But it was not just numbers and papers. We needed proof of her manipulations in action, moments that could never be dismissed as coincidence. The investigators skillfully arranged for discreet surveillance, capturing videos that revealed her charm turning to coercion, her persuasive words bending the will of those who trusted her, and subtle but calculated actions that manipulated the people and situations around her for her own benefit. Watching those recordings was almost unbearable, yet I felt a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice forming in the midst of anger and fear. It became increasingly clear that the woman who had so effortlessly humiliated me at Micah's wedding was a master of deception, a person capable of weaving a convincing mask over a deeply manipulative nature. Every document we uncovered added another layer to the story: emails revealing hidden motives, contracts signed under duress, financial statements that contradicted her claims, and evidence of previous marriages that ended under circumstances far from ordinary. The full tapestry of her actions began to emerge, not as isolated events, but as a consistent, deliberate strategy, a life lived for personal gain at the expense of anyone who became entangled in her orbit. I realized that the sophistication of her manipulations was matched only by the cold detachment with which she executed them, and the knowledge both terrified and galvanized me. As we worked late into the nights, I felt a transformation within myself. The fear that had once paralyzed me after the wedding was replaced by a focus, a clarity of purpose that sharpened with every revelation. I began to understand the intricate methods Sarah employed, the subtle ways she ingratiated herself, the lies she told with such ease that even those closest to her were blind to the truth. With every record, every video, and every piece of evidence, I built a mosaic that could finally expose her reality to Michael, a mosaic he could not ignore, a truth he needed to see before it was too late. I also realized that patience was key. Our work had to be precise and deliberate, for a single misstep could alert Sarah and drive her deeper into her carefully crafted concealment. Together with the investigator, I organized the evidence meticulously, cross-referencing and verifying, ensuring that nothing could be dismissed as circumstantial. Each revelation was a step closer to protecting my son, a way to arm him with the knowledge he deserved without shattering his world in a single moment. In those long hours, surrounded by documents and screens, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction, a quiet triumph in knowing that the truth was finally being unearthed, and that the shadow Sarah had cast over Michael's life was beginning to dissolve under the light of undeniable evidence. The night I decided to confront the situation felt both heavy and strangely empowering, as if every sleepless hour, every painstaking piece of research, and every ounce of fear I had carried since the wedding had built toward this singular moment. I knew that exposing Sarah, revealing her true identity, her past marriages, her carefully orchestrated schemes required more than words. It demanded irrefutable evidence, undeniable proof that could strip away the mask she wore so convincingly. With the investigator's guidance, I had assembled a meticulous archive, financial records that contradicted her stories, contracts that bore witness to her manipulations, videos capturing moments of deceit, and documents exposing the pattern of fraud that had defined her life. Each piece was a thread, and together they formed a tapestry that could finally tell the story she had spent years concealing. I carefully planned the confrontation, and knowing that timing and precision were crucial, using technology we had arranged for discrete recordings and digital presentations, I created a scenario where neither Sarah's charm nor her practiced composure could deflect the truth. When the day came, I invited both Sarah and Michael into a room that felt simultaneously tense and charged with anticipation. I spoke first to Sarah, letting the calm authority in my voice carry the weight of the revelations that were about to unfold. I presented the documents, each one a blow to the carefully maintained facade she had built, and the videos that showed her manipulations in action left no room for denial. I watched the flicker of surprise, then defensiveness, cross her face as the reality she had tried to hide materialized before her eyes, and I felt no satisfaction in her discomfort, only the solemn knowledge that justice, in its quietest form, was taking hold. Turning to Michael, I felt the ache of seeing the man he was, the son I had always tried to protect, confronted by the truth in a way that was both shocking and necessary. I guided him through the evidence slowly, explaining not just the facts but the patterns, the subtle strategies of deception that had ensnared him. The shock on his face was tempered by a dawning understanding, the realization that the life he had envisioned with Sarah was built on illusions and half-truths. I could see the gratitude and trust returning in his eyes, the quiet acknowledgement that the mother who had been shunned at his wedding had acted not out of anger or pride, but out of love and a determination to protect him from harm, both financial and emotional. Sarah's attempts to justify herself, to spin explanations and blame, fell flat against the weight of the evidence, and I felt a quiet resolve strengthen within me. I knew that exposing her was only the first step. The next was ensuring that the damage she could cause was neutralized, that Michael's future, his heart, and his resources were safeguarded. Every document, every video, every record we had compiled worked in concert to strip away the deceit, leaving nothing but the stark, undeniable truth. I watched as Michael began to see clearly, his eyes no longer clouded by affection or hope, but open to reality, and I felt the relief of knowing that the threat that had loomed over him for months was finally lifted. By the end of the day, the room held a quiet gravity, a mixture of confrontation, revelation, and resolution. I had faced the fear that had haunted me, stood firm against the lies, and used careful planning and technology to protect the person who mattered most. The power of truth, when wielded with precision and patience, had dismantled deception, exposed hidden motives, and secured a future where Michael could move forward with clarity and confidence. In that moment, I realized that the struggles, the late nights of research, and the painstaking attention detail had not been in vain. They had restored honesty to a life that had been teetering on the edge of manipulation. And in doing so, I had fulfilled the promise I had silently made the day I left his wedding, to protect him, no matter the cost. The day everything came to a close, I remember feeling a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and quiet triumph. After weeks of careful investigation, sleepless nights, and painstakingly gathering every piece of evidence, the final confrontation had gone exactly as I had planned. Sofia, whose real name, Sarah Martinez, had already peeled away the carefully constructed mask she wore, was finally confronted with the full weight of her deceit. She had no choice but to face the truth. The documentation, videos, and financial records we had compiled left no room for argument or manipulation. I watched as the realization settled over her, a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and resignation. It was a moment of reckoning, and the power she once wielded through charm and cunning had evaporated completely. With the legal papers laid before her, she was forced to sign a full confession, acknowledging the manipulations, frauds, and lies she had used to infiltrate our lives. She left without claiming any part of Michael's assets, a symbol not just of her failure, but of justice restored. There was no drama, no last-minute schemes, only the quiet acknowledgement that her plans had unraveled, that her web of deception had been dismantled. Watching her walk away, I felt a profound sense of closure, a reassurance that the person I loved most, my son, was safe, his life no longer shadowed by someone who had sought to exploit his trust. Turning to Michael, I saw in his eyes a combination of sorrow for the betrayal he had experienced and gratitude for the guidance he had received. Our reconciliation was quiet, almost tender, filled with unspoken words and the relief of restored trust. I reminded him gently, as I had tried to for so long, that love should never blind us to reality, that vigilance and discernment were essential even when emotions ran deep. This experience, painful as it had been, became a lesson in understanding genuine love versus manipulation, in valuing parental guidance, and in recognizing the signs of deceit before they could cause irreparable harm. I could see the weight lifting from his shoulders, the clarity returning to his gaze, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my efforts had not only protected him, but also taught him a lesson that would guide him for the rest of his life. As I stood there, reflecting on everything we had endured, I felt a deep gratitude for the resilience, patience, and courage that had carried us through. Life had a way of testing the bonds between us, of challenging trust and loyalty, but in the end, honesty, determination, and unwavering love had prevailed. Michael was safe, aware, and wiser, and I was reminded that a mother's protective instincts, when combined with patience and careful action, could shield those we love from harm. Thank you for joining me on this journey through deception, revelation, and reconciliation. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow more stories of courage, truth, and the power of love. Every click helps support the channel and brings you closer to more captivating tales, just like this one.